guys, it's Ty and welcome back to my channel. So we're doing another end of the year video. So I've already done all the books that I've DNF'd this year and my most surprising books of this year. So I will have those videos linked in case you guys have not had a chance to check them out. I suggest that you do. But today we are focusing on all the disappointing reads of 2023. So I do have one book that I would consider as the worst book of the year. And if you've been around this channel this year, then you probably know which book I am referring to. But if you don't, I would stick around and check that out. But the rest of these books, I am just considering a disappointment because I was very excited for them and for whatever reason, they just didn't work out. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So the first book that I want to talk about is Gleanings, and this is, I guess you would consider like the fourth book in the Arc of the Scythe series. It is a short story collection, and the Arc of the Scythe series came out a few years ago. Like the last book was completed a few years ago, and then this one came out a couple of years after that. But the Arc of the Scythe series, it is a young adult dystopian series, and it's set in this world where no one can die. Like you can't die from sickness, disease. If you get hit by a car, they'll just take you to a revival center and like bring you back to life. But because of that, they have to do something to control the population. So they have these scythes in different parts of the world where they can determine who they literally want to kill. And if you are killed by a scythe, there is no bringing you back. So we are following two characters, Stitcher and Rowan, as they become scythe apprentices, and we watch their journey doing that. So I did really enjoy that series, especially the first book in the series, which is called Scythe. But this one, I just was not feeling a lot of the short stories in here. What I wanted from this and what I thought we were going to get from this is short stories that revolved around the main characters in the main series. And that's not really what we got. We got a lot of short stories that involved like new characters and obviously like new situations. And I just wasn't interested in the new characters that we got. The stories that I did enjoy, I only enjoyed like 5 out of the 14. Those stories did like reference some of the older characters in that series, and I really liked those. But other than that, these stories were just disappointing. Some of them I felt were way too long. Some of them I felt were way too short, which is the typical problem, you know, with short story collections. It's going to be a hard sell on them, but I just wanted to enjoy this a lot more than I did, especially because I enjoyed the overall series. So yeah, this one just did not work for me. The next one that I want to talk about is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. So this is my first book by this author. It is a YA horror, and so we're following this gender fluid character by the name of Mars. And at the beginning, he learns that his sister has died, and he thinks that it has to be tied to this like prestigious summer camp that he went to in the group that his sister was involved in, which was called the Honeys. So Mars decides that they're going to go back to the summer camp so he can figure out what happened to his sister and get some more information on the Honeys. This was very boring to me. It was very slow. The only thing that I liked about this book was the character of Mars. I loved everything about this character. And if we just had a book about Mars, I think I would have been way more satisfied than the book that we actually got. And so it was about like almost halfway into the story before we even really started looking into this group called the Honeys. And then once we did start looking into this group, I didn't understand anything. I did not understand the ending. I didn't understand why the group, the Honeys, was so significant. I didn't understand their relationship to bees. Bees are brought up a lot in the story, and I did not understand the connection to any of it. And maybe if I did, I would have enjoyed this more. Some people really enjoy this story, but I am in the minority here because I did not. I also think that this had a really good audiobook with like lots of sound effects. Like if they were wandering around in the forest, you know, it gives you like the sound of the insects, the birds. It just gave you like a foresty feel. And I think I would have enjoyed, again, the audiobook better if I understood the story better, and I just didn't. So I did not like this one. So the next one I have here is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This is a adult horror. This one has been a big hit or miss for some people. And for me, sadly, it was a miss. So in this one, we are following two main characters. So we have Luis and Mark, and They are brother and sister. They recently found out that their parents had died in like this horrible accident. And so they have to get together to figure out what they're gonna do with their parents' house. And so while they are getting it prepped and ready to sell and cleaning it out and whatnot, some spooky things begin to take place in this house. In the beginning, I was interested in this, but as the story slowly went along, the horror elements in this, I feel like, were just too silly for me. And listen, I'm somebody that likes a silly story, but this just went really over the top. And I was also really annoyed by the two main characters because they are siblings. You know, they argued a lot to the point that I just found it to be very annoying. This book does really touch on grief and, you know, how people deal with the loss of their parents, and then the difficulties of what happens after, you know, people die and what you have, all the things you have to go through. Yeah, I just couldn't take how silly this was. And then I just didn't like the two main characters. And because I didn't even like any of the characters, this was just really hard for me to get into. I also felt like this was just really long. A lot of the scenes were, it just felt like they were dragged out. And then there was a few scenes in here that I just didn't think that we needed. Yeah, this is my least favorite book by Grady Hendrix. I am so sad that I did not enjoy this one. I really pushed through to get through it, hoping that like the end will save it for me, but the end was even more silly than the other parts of the book. And yeah, I was really disappointed in this one. So next we have Antimatter Blues. This is by Edward Ashton. It is the second book in like the Mickey 7, I think it's a duology. And so this is adult science fiction. Mickey 7, I absolutely adored at this point. I think it's probably like one of my all-time favorite books. The year that I read it, I'm pretty sure it was last year. I put it in my top books for that year. And so if you have not heard of this duology, Mickey 7, we follow this character by the name of Mickey, and he is considered a expendable. And so we follow these group of people who are living on this planet, and Mickey's job is to basically take on a lot of the missions that could possibly get him killed. If he is killed, then another iteration of him is created, and we just keep going. And so at the start of that story, we are following Mickey 7. And so he like falls into a hole, and then his best friend Berto assumes that he's dead. And so he reports Mickey as dead. But as soon as Mickey makes it back to the home base, because obviously he's not dead, there is already Mickey 8. And so with this particular job, you're not supposed to have more than 2 iterations of Mickey at the same time. So Mickey 7 and Mickey 8 have to keep it a secret from everyone that there's 2 of them. And then there's some other stuff that's also going on this planet as well. I loved that story. I loved the interactions between Mickey 7 and Mickey 8, and that is what I think made me adore that story so much. And so in Antimatter Blues, we follow the events right after the first book. And sadly enough, this one took me quite a while to get into the story. Whereas with the first book, I was pulled in right away. It was about halfway into this one before I felt like I was really invested into the story. And then I felt like the magic that we got in Mickey 7, between Mickey 7 and Mickey 8, it just was not the same in this book. Some things definitely changed with like the characters. We are introduced to some new characters, and one of the characters that we are introduced to in this one, I really enjoyed, but it just wasn't the same feel like we got in Mickey 7. And then towards the end of the book, when, you know, all the things start to happen all at once, some characters in here were doing some things that I don't feel like they should have been doing. They were doing uncharacteristic things. And so it just kind of brought down my overall enjoyment for this. That's not to say that I did not enjoy it. I just did not enjoy it as much as I wanted to. And so for that, I would have to consider this one a disappointment. So then we have Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. And this one is an adult horror. I was pumped for this story because I loved her debut book, The Hacienda, that came out last year, I think. And I also put that one in my best books of that year. And I just knew that I was going to go into this one loving it. And sadly, that is not the case. Honestly surprised that I even pushed through it, because there were several points in this where I really wanted to DNF it. So in this one, we are following 2 characters, who I forgot. Nina and Nestor. And so when Nina and Nestor were younger, they were best friends, and one day she gets attacked by this creature, and Nestor assumes that she had died. Like he looked at her and saw that she was dead. And so he was devastated over this loss. And so he had ended up leaving their town. He comes back years later because they are about to go to war with the United States, because this takes place like the mid 1800s. And so he is going to go help out with that war. And then when he gets back to the town, he sees that Nina is alive and well, and he is shook. But she's like mad at him because she felt like he left her, and then he's just shocked that she's alive. And so they're both going out to this war because she's a healer, so she's gonna try to help anyone that gets injured. And so while they're going off to go fight, there are these creatures who they figure out at some point are vampires attacking people and killing them. But this was just kind of boring. This focused a lot on the relationship between Nina and Nestor, which I did not care about. In the beginning, I was interested in it, but after a while it just got really boring. I was tired of being in their heads. I was tired of them just not talking about their feelings and telling each other how they felt. I wanted to see vampires. I was looking for the vampires. That's what it says up here, vampires of El Norte, but that's not what we got. There were very few and far in between. There weren't a lot of scenes with the vampires in them, which is sad because I liked the vampires. I liked how they were depicted in the story, but we just did not see enough of them. And so I think going into the story, I had the wrong expectations. I had started to see people's reviews saying that this was more romance heavy, and I'm okay with romance, but I still thought that this would have a better balance between the romance and the vampires, and it did not. And so I did not like this one at all. So this is another sad one for me, and this is Black Girls Must Have It All by Jane Allen. And so this is just a adult like fiction. There's a bit of romance in here as well. And so in the first book in this series, it is called Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. I loved that book. I gave it 5 stars. And in that one, we are following our main character, Tabitha. And she's kind of like dealing with a lot of stuff. She's dealing with some stuff at her job at the news casting world, and then she's having some issues in her relationship with Mark. They're not really sure how serious they are about each other, but she's also trying to start a family, or she's wanting to. There are some issues between her and her friends, and so at the beginning, she gets some devastating news that she might not be able to conceive a child. And so we are following Tabitha as she is dealing with all of the stuff in her life. And I loved it. I felt like parts of it was very relatable, especially when it came to women feeling like there's a timeline put on their life of when they have to be married, start a family, where they should be at in their career. I loved all of the conversation around that, and I adored that book. I did listen to all of these. It's 3 books. I listened to all of them on audio. They are so easy to get wrapped up in. As the series went on, I honestly think that that first book could have been a standalone. I don't think that we needed 2 extra books continuing to follow Tabitha. Maybe if we were following like different characters in her life, but just following Tabitha over the years, it just kind of got boring. It wasn't as interesting, especially in this one. We're still just following Tabitha in her life, and it's, I don't want to say like nothing exciting happened in her life, but it wasn't as interesting as it was in that first book. And so, I mean, I still thought this was okay. I just don't think it was needed. And I probably could have gone without reading this one or the second one and just would have stayed enjoying that first one. But yeah, I didn't really like this one. So then next we have Lone Women by Victor Laval. This is a adult historical horror. And so it takes place way back in like the early 1900s, and we're following our main character, Adelaide. And at the beginning, she is basically fleeing her home. Her home was set on fire. Her parents have been killed. And so Adelaide is trying to escape to make a new life. I think it's like in Montana, maybe. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's like Montana, somewhere out there in the West. She's trying to make a new life for herself. And so while she's doing that, she is dragging around this trunk that has something in there that is wreaking havoc in her life and wherever she brings it. And so we're just following Adelaide as she is trying to make a new life for herself out in the West. And I didn't like it. I thought this was very boring. The only parts that I liked was when we talked about this trunk and what was inside of it. And again, it's one of those stories where those scenes were few and far in between. I did also kind of like seeing Adelaide make a life for herself out in, you know, the early 1900s. That was interesting, but there wasn't a good balance between doing that and learning about what was in this trunk. And so at a certain point too, there was just like a lot of characters that were introduced in this story and you don't really learn a lot about them. And then I felt like the ending was rushed. It just didn't give me enough of what I wanted from this. And I think this is another one of those books where people either really liked it or they fell more in line with me and did not like it. And it's sad because this was my first book by this author and I was really excited for it because I've heard a lot of good things about his work, but this was not a good introduction and I probably would not recommend this for anyone to start with just because the reviews are so mixed. But yeah, I was hoping that I would have enjoyed this one a lot more, but sadly I did not. So next, this one was a surprising disappointment for me because I was not expecting to pick it up. I didn't even know that it was coming out, but when I did see that we were getting this, I became really, really excited for it. And I was even more excited when I got approved for an arc of it. And that is Out There Screaming. It is an anthology collection that is edited by Jordan Peele, who was the director of Get Out, which I adored that movie. And so I was really excited that we were getting something that Jordan Peele had a hand in, but I did not like this. So there was about 19 stories in this anthology, and I only liked about half, which, I mean, that's pretty good, but still, I thought that I was going to enjoy more of these stories. So this did revolve around slavery, racism, lots of grief, suicide. It dealt with like a lot of heavy topics, but I felt in a lot of these stories, it was lacking the horror that I wanted and what I was looking for. Again, with like any anthology or short story collection, like some of these stories felt way too short. Some of them felt way too long. Some of the messaging in some of these stories was very confusing to me and I just did not understand. There was like a story or two in here that I basically skimmed. I know there was a story in here that I actually DNF'd. So this whole collection to me was disappointing, even though I did like about half. I was just expecting so much more from this than what we got, and sadly I didn't enjoy it. So then we have 0 Days by Ruth Ware. And so this is her first stab at doing like a thriller, which I was excited because she is doing something different, but whoa, it took a lot to get through this one. So we are following, don't remember their name. Her name is Jacinta, but she goes by Jack. And so Jack and her husband go around trying to see if they can break into like these company security systems, and they give these companies recommendations on how they can make their security system better. So in the beginning, Jack and her husband are working at this company and they're in the middle of trying to break in. And so by the time she makes it home, and her husband actually works from home and he's like relaying messages to her while she's actually there trying to break in, she finds that her husband has been killed and then she's framed for it. So now she is on the run trying to prove her innocence while also trying to figure out who killed her husband. This was very boring. We spend a lot of time in Jack's head, which got very boring and old very fast. This did not have a lot of the action that I would have thought this type of thriller would have had. And then I did not like the character of Jack because some of the decisions that she was making to me just did not make sense. For her to work in the type of field that she works in, I would think that she would know how to do a lot of the things that she was trying to do. And it seemed like all of that went out the window when she was trying to figure out what happened to her husband. There's not a lot of characters in here, so I felt like it was so easy from the very beginning to figure out who did this. The why behind it was a little convoluted to me, but figuring out who did it was not that hard, and you could figure it out really early in the story. So this one was really hard to get through. I will give Ruth Ware her props for trying to come up with the thriller. I prefer her mysteries better. So the moment that we have all been waiting for. This is the worst book that I have read in 2023, and that is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is an adult mystery thriller. So we're following this girl named Alex. She's a struggling writer, and she gets invited to go to like this mansion for a writing competition with like 4 other writers. And when they get there, they learn from like the host, her name is Rosa, she's a really popular author, that they will have a month to create a story, and the best story will win money. And I think their story will also get published. And so while they're there, they get like snowed in, so they're all stuck in this mansion, and then someone goes missing, and we have to figure out what happened. This book was so boring. There were so many points in here that I just wanted to DNF, but I kept going. And in the beginning, Alex had like a falling out with her best friend. The first part of this story was all about this falling out that her and her best friend had, and it took so long to even figure out why they fell out. And so it wasn't just given to us all at once. It was gradually revealed throughout the story, and it was so stupid. And I was so tired of hearing about Alex and her friend that are no longer friends. And of course, this friend ends up being a part of this competition as well. Then, like I said, somebody goes missing. That did not happen until well over like halfway into the story. It took so long that at a certain point, I thought I missed it. I thought I missed the part where they went missing, but no, it just took a long time for it to happen. Then, you know, they're supposed to be writing the stories. So we're getting like, I think it's Alex's book. So it's like a book within a book. So certain chapters, we're getting excerpts from her book, which was so boring. It's so boring. And I also thought that this story was gonna have more like horror in it, because the mansion that they're in, there was like some stories revolved around it, and it's supposed to be like haunted. No. Then we get like these scenes with like some kind of like sex demon that's like terrorizing a couple of people, especially Alex. And so I was not a fan of that. I was not a fan of how Alex was like coming to terms with like her sexuality, and then there was like a situation that happened with that I was not a fan of. And then everything did not happen. All of this thrillery stuff that we were supposed to get, I thought, throughout the story did not happen until the last third. I did like the last third of this story, but I wish that it would have been spread out over the whole entire book, because by the time it happened at the end, it just felt silly. It felt rushed, and I did not like it. The only thing that I liked about this was that these writers were put in a situation that would cause them to write like a good story. That's what that was my takeaway from this book. Everything else to me was just stupid. It was boring, and I wanted more from this. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because a lot of people love this story. I don't think I got the same book that they got, but some people really, really like this one. Me, I honestly just felt like it was the worst book of this year. I will stand by that. I do have a standalone review if you guys want to check that out in case I missed anything from that review. But yeah, I did not like the story at all. So these are all the books that I would consider the most disappointing / worst books of 2023. Again, I will have my other end of the year videos linked in case you guys want to check those out. And I will also link any videos where I have done like standalone reviews for these books. So I will have all of that linked down below, but I will see you guys next time. Bye.